Ch49 Everblaze. About time we got here, Kif said, smirking at Sophie from the archway to the Wonderling Woods. And it looks like we have a chaperone. What kind of lame party is this? One where we will both come home alive and without any broken bones, Sanders said, sniffing the air and scanning the trees around them. But Sophie didn't have any broken bones last. Wait, does this mean Gigantor is starting to care about me? Should we hug it out? He held out his arms. Sanders shoved past him. Stay behind me, and keep in mind that Miss Foster is, and always will be, my first priority. Mine too, Kif said as he fell in step beside Sophie. As soon as they crossed into the woods, Sanders strayed off the regular path, cutting through the grassy knolls that looked far less tranquil covered in shadow. The Wonderlings had hidden their flowers and leaves, turning the trees into a forest of skeletons, and the silence felt different in the twilight, sharper and colder, like the woods was holding its breath, waiting to pounce. Relax, Foster, Kif said, taking her hand and then immediately dropping it. Sheesh, keep up that kind of worrying and you're going to make us both hurl. Plus, that clenched jaw thing you're doing makes you look like an angry chipmunk. Sophie pretended to ignore him, but she did force her jaw to relax. Did your parents give you a hard time about going tonight? She asked, needing to break the eerie silence. A little, Kif admitted. My dad has apparently decided that my connection to you could ruin the Sensen name, which is awesome, by the way. Now I get to hang with you and tick my dad off. Win and win. He elbowed Sophie until she smiled. What about your mom? Sophie asked. She said, and I quote, can't you rescue the alicorn again? It's been nice actually having a son I can brag about. He mimicked Lady Gisella's voice perfectly, which made the words that much more awful. Sophie reached for his hand. I'm sorry. Kif shrugged. Several seconds passed before he added, my dad did make sure I wore a cape to keep warm, so I guess that counts as worrying about me. Maybe. Definitely. Sophie agreed, with as much enthusiasm as she could muster. Yeah, though of course my mom told me I fastened it too loosely and insisted I repin it twice. Now it looked tight enough to choke him, and his Sensen crest was digging into his chin. Sophie squeezed his hand harder. They walked the rest of the way in silence, their breaths turning to huffs as the ground became steeper and steeper. Cold sweat dripped down Sophie's back as they crested the hill, but it was worth the climb when she spotted her Wonderling. Dangling from one of the thin, fragile branches was a small twinkling bottle strung with a silver satin ribbon. Sanders shoved Kif and Sophie behind him as he sniffed the air and then fragile vial. Then he slowly untied the ribbon and offered it to Sophie. It appears to be safe, but I would not advise opening it. I don't think we need to, she said, lifting the bottle to study it against the night sky. The blue glow was filled with tiny flecks of darkness and shimmer, all of which swirled like glitter in a snow globe. And when she traced her finger along the cold, damp glass, the memory finally triggered. This is light from the Cilliant. It's one of the unmapped stars. Okay, Kif said, leaning closer to the bottle. That explains why it looks so freaky. Any idea what we do with it? Or is it just like a fun souvenir we get to keep from tonight's daring journey? Actually, I'm pretty sure the journey is just getting started. She pulled back her sleeve and removed her charm bracelet, holding up the black swan charm. Magcidian can also serve as a living crystal, and I've seen it work differently with different kinds of light. I'm betting they want us to use the glow from the Cillian to leap to the real meeting place. Kif grinned. Cute and smart. No wonder Dex gave you a ring. Sophie hid behind her hair. You ready? I should go first, Sander decided. You can't leap without one of us, Sophie reminded him. And even if you could, you might not be able to come back here. We don't know how this is going to work. Then perhaps we shouldn't go, Sander argued. Oh, come on. Where's your sense of adventure? Kif asked. It is overshadowed by my sense of responsibility. My job is to bring you home safe. There you go, caring about me again, Kif said with a grin. But come on, you know we need to find out what the Black Swan is up to. That's why we came here. Sander looked like he wanted to pick them both up and drag them back to Havenfield, but he released his death grip on Sophie's hand, letting her press the charm against the glowing vial. The tiny swan crusted with a thin layer of frost as a beam of sparkling, swirling blue light refracted at her feet. That is awesome, Gibbs said as he looped his arm through hers. You ready, Gigantor? A squeaky snort was Sander's only reply, but he curled one massive hand around Sophie's arm, keeping his other on the hilt of his blade as Kif pulled them into the icy light. The cold rush was a tempest, tearing and shredding and turning. Sophie tried to scream or cry or call someone's name, but she couldn't think, couldn't function. She was empty. She was nothing. She was, slamming into the hot ground like a bug against a windshield, then tumbling until she collapsed in a heap. Okay, Kif said, choking on the dry, dusty air. I am definitely not a fan of that kind of leaping. Let's call a normal beam of light for the way home, shall we? I don't think we can. Sophie pulled herself to her feet, coughing and hacking as she used the glow of the salient to show him the stalagmite covered ceiling. We just leaped underground. So that's why it felt like getting stepped on by an ogre. Actually, the ogre stomping would have been preferable, Sander told him. I guess you would know, Keith agreed. How hard was it not to go all goblin rage on King Dimitar when he punched you like that? I know you held back. It is not my place to attack the ogre king. Not yet, but that is a conversation for another day. Right now, I see too much more concerning issues. He stood and waved his arm around the cave, which was much smaller than Sophie realized, barely larger than her closet. There are no tunnels and no stairs in or out of this place. Yeah, and where's the black swan? Keith cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted, Yo guys, what gives? Even my dad's a better host than this. A shower of dust as his echo ricocheted off the ceiling was the only reply. Wait, Sophie said, making her way over to a stalagmite that seemed slightly less dark than the others. She wasn't sure if it was just a trick of the light, but as she ran her hands over the jagged point, her fingers felt the cool smoothness of a glass. It's another bottle. She tied the bottle of the Cilliant around her neck before picking up the round, bulbous vial filled with a glow so pale it barely counted as starlight. But she could feel the energy pulsing through the glass and knew the glow came from Candicia. Another unmapped star, Sophie whispered, holding it out to show the others. I wonder if that means we'll have 3 more lips after this. Let's hope not, Sander grumbled. For once, Gigantor and I agree. Sophie knew how they were feeling, but the only way out of the cramped pocket of earth was to keep going. On 3, she decided, pressing the charm against the glass. Another beam of light flashed from the swan's beak, dull and smoky and hardly inviting. 1, she called as Kif and Sander wrapped their arms around her. 2, she hesitated half a second, then she pulled them forward on. 3, light leaping had never felt so slow. Each second was 1,000 years, and the gray emptiness seemed to drain their energy away. A blast of wind finally shoved them out of the gloom, and then they were crumbling onto a patch of soggy sand. If Kif hadn't said, Okay, I don't mean to freak anyone out, but I'm pretty sure that's a kraken, Sophie might never have gotten up again. Sander dragged her to her feet, shoving her behind him as he raised his sword at the monstrous green beast. It looked like some strange combination of an octopus, an elephant, and a lion, and when it opened its 6-fanged mouth and roared, Sophie couldn't believe she'd come all that way just to be eaten by a sea monster. But when the kraken lunged for them, it smacked into some sort of invisible shield, flattening its trunk-like tentacled nose and knocking the slimy beast back. It tried 3 more times to break the unseen barrier, then zipped away with another roar, vanishing into the dark water. So, we're under the ocean, Sophie mumbled, knowing she was stating the obvious but needing to say it anyway. I thought light couldn't pass through the water, and that's why we have to slide down a whirlpool to get to Atlantis. It's not supposed to pass through rock either, Kif reminded her. The light from the unmapped stars must be different. Maybe that's why they're secret. And look, there's another one. They all stared at the curved bottle nestled into the sand, glowing with the rosy light of Markashire. Okay, what do we think? Kif asked as Sophie used the charm to create a pink glittery beam. Better or worse than the others? Worse, Sander decided, and Kif had to agree. But Sophie chose better as she pulled them into the shimmering light, since sparkles made everything better, didn't they? But she was wrong. So very wrong. Each glinting speck turned course as they traveled, grating and scraping like they were leaping through a glitter bomb. She was starting to worry the pain would never end when the warmth fizzled and the ground rushed up at them, leaving them in a shivering heap on a misty hilltop right by another bottle. Phosphorine, Sophie mumbled as she tied it around her neck with the others. The swirly opalescent light was a sensory overload of color and motion, and the lip was a non-stop roller coaster of spinning and dipping and swerving. Sophie was sure she would have hurled all over the neon colors if her stomach hadn't been broken and scattered into a million pieces. And when they finally collapsed onto hard, frosty ground, it took several seconds before her eyes could focus on a stretch of empty tundra. A silvery bottle was buried in the hoarfrost. Last one, she said, her hands shaking as she carefully grabbed the bottle of quintessence. And I have a feeling this is going to be the toughest one yet. Remember, this stuff can blow up cities. Wonderful, Sander grumbled. Aren't you glad you insisted on coming along? Sophie asked him. Yes, I am. I'm always happiest when I know I'm keeping you safe. Oh, Gigander's so cute. Kif interrupted. Who knew under all those muscles was a ball of marshmallowy sweetness? Sander growled at him, but Kip just laughed. Squeak all you want. It only makes you more precious. Okay, this is it, Sophie said, reminding them why they were all there. The black swan should be waiting for us at the end of this. We just need to survive one more leap. You had me all excited until you used the word survive, Kip told her as Sophie held her breath and pressed the charm against the last vial, casting a blindingly bright silver beam at their feet. Now that the moment was here, she wasn't sure she was ready to face the black swan, and whatever terrifying plans came with them, but she clung to Sander and Keith, and they held onto her just as tightly. Slowly, bravely, they all stepped into the light.